Once again, it's good to be just sharing these things. Today, the theme is actually called valuable, and how valuable do we think we are? And it all kind of really stemmed a few days ago. We have written this daily devotional called Faith Food for Every Day, and you can buy it on our website. And
if you're living in England,
it was.
If you're living in England.
If you're living in England, because it's too heavy to send all over the world. But on a few days ago, the theme, which actually Joyce has written, ran a song written by Graham Kendrick, which says, "How much do you think you are worth?" And it's an amazing song. Actually, I was reading it through kind of fast, so I'm quite moved. And it's worth listening to. Kind of, we're going to put links on the printed word so you can listen to it. So it's an amazing song. Graham Kendrick's songs are absolutely, he's got an amazing ability to kind of capture truth. And he's just talking about value, and he then just says, well, how much do you think you're worth? Is a rich man worth more than a poor man? Is a stranger worth more than or less than a friend? And then it just says, part way through, I've just put these words in this week's message. If you heard that your life had been valued, that a price had been paid on the nail, would you ask what was traded, how much, and who paid it? Who was it, and what was his name? If you heard that his name was called Jesus, would you say that the price is too dear? And then it goes on talking of the fact that Jesus went to the cross to pay the price for you and me because he thought we were worth it. And, you know, with people with low self-image and kind of when life is kind of going the wrong way, you just think, well, you know, does anybody care? And the answer is yes, anybody. There's another verse. I was sitting in the garden. We've got birds all over the place, and we're just since we moved into this house, we've got fields. We've got a farm in the distance, and loads of birds. And I just was thinking, it just says in the word that, you know, a sparrow doesn't even fall to the ground without God knowing about it. It says, aren't you much more valuable than sparrows? And I just really want to encourage people today that you are valuable. I'm valuable because I'm valuable to Jesus. I'm valuable to the Father. And that means that it can just drive away some of the discouragement that sometimes we feel.
Amen. We've recently been writing. We're writing a new book, and we've been away last week, spending some time able just to be quiet, away from the phone and everything else. And you recall stories that you've lived with in the past. And we were talking particularly about a young man who very sadly discovered that his wife had cheated on him, and when he confronted her they had a row, and it ended up with him shaking her, and he actually shook her to death. Ended up in prison, and we were asked to go and visit him. And you know, we'd never been in a prison before, and we went out to Bristol. We didn't know what to do, what to say, but we just prayed and asked God for his wisdom, and we asked God specifically for a word for this young man. And the word God gave, and we were able to give him when we visited him, was that there is nothing that cannot be forgiven, cannot be cleansed, cannot be, it can't be reversed. And she had died, and that was very sad. And he took that punishment, served a prison sentence. But the guilt and the shame and the condemnation and the awful emotional aspects of what had happened, God was assuring him that it is just extreme grace and mercy to be forgiven, to be made clean, to be still valued when something like that has happened in your life is good news. And that's the good news that comes from the death of Jesus. And several years after that, I mean, it was several years, wasn't it?
It was quite a long time. Yeah.
Charles was leading at the Shetland Bible Week, which takes place with all the churches gathered together in Lerwick in the Shetland Islands. And a man, a completely different man, a total stranger, came on the boat to Lerwick from Aberdeen for a holiday around the Shetland Isles. And as he moved into the port, this Bible Week was being advertised, big posters saying when it was, where it was, what time, venue, theme, etc. And as he stood and looked at that, he just had the most incredible sense. You need to be there. You need to hear what these people have got to say. You need to be there. And that night he turned up in the meeting. And Charles was ministering particularly about the amazing grace of God, that only the grace of God can forgive, cleanse, heal, and take away guilt and shame. And after the meeting, this man, Charles, invited people who wanted prayer, specific prayer, that he would pray for them individually. And this man made himself known. And he said, I also killed my wife many years ago. But he said, the guilt has never left me. And it's always dogging me, and it's always there in my thoughts, and I'm dealing with it the whole time. And Charles was able to pray with him, talk to him. He'd heard the teaching on the grace and the forgiveness of God, but he left that meeting that night as a new man, really knowing that God had cleansed him and that he didn't need to live with guilt and shame. The facts were the same, but his relationship and his value to God, he realised, were different after he'd heard that message.
It was amazing because it was like part through my imagination, talking about forgiveness, and suddenly the Lord just said, you need to tell this story because some of these people here, they have real difficulty. There's certain things they almost feel can't be forgiven. And so I suddenly found myself telling that story. I hadn't stuck it in my preparation at all, but it was just God that knew this man was in the service, and the way that he was set free that night, and suddenly all that guilt and shame and lack of self-worth had disappeared, and he was able to receive God's forgiveness. And I just kind of rejoiced. I thought, Lord, it's amazing the way that you kind of prompt something to happen, and it just changes someone's life.
The other story that we were writing about and remembering was the story of a man who had been in the Second World War. He was a commando. He was a very tough guy, and he'd had a young man witness to him on the train going to work about Jesus and what Jesus could do for you. But he was very dismissive and was always putting the guy who was talking to him down. And when he went off to be in the Second World War and became a commander, this chap who travelled with him and witnessed to him about Jesus said to him, I'll pray for you. And it'll be a story that's in our new book, but he had the most amazing conversion experience. And he said when he heard that Jesus would forgive and cleanse and give you a new start, he cried. He wasn't a crier. He was a tough soldier. But he said he cried because it was the
best story he'd ever heard.
Sweetest story he had ever heard. And he got radically saved. And he's with the Lord now. But you remember these things because you're writing about the past and how God has dealt with real life. So.
Yes, and just the fact that people have just come, they've met Jesus, they've found the things that he said to them, and it just transforms their life. It just takes them out of kind of a pit of despair, and it puts them into a pathway of peace. Blessing, of peace, and just knowing that God is on your side and he loves you and cares for you, and he makes you very valuable.
Amen.